Good afternoon. I am Joonatan Virtanen, a doctoral candidate at the University of Helsinki, Faculty of Social Sciences in Political Science, within which public administration and management is studied at Helsinki. There are my slides. Thank you. And I'd like to thank the organizers of this event for the opportunity to honor Professor Pollitt's work. And I have to admit it is rather a challenging task to represent young and future scholars as a whole. But regardless, during this short piece of mine, I will try. As a personal note, for the beginning, my own research studies coordination ideas in Finnish public administration in its recent history, and I would probably not be doing it in this form, at least, if it were not for the broad, comparative and transnational basic research background available thanks to the work of Professor Pollitt and his collaborators. And I think that it is this work which enables thicker single country studies to focus their attention more sharply on relevant and interesting issues within their own contexts. So, I'd like to draw 3 issues or 3 lessons which I believe will retain their value and whose value will most likely even increase for the work of my generation and forthcoming ones. And these issues have already been spoken of by previous speakers, but I'll try to add some perspective of my own to them. And the first of them is context. Context matters, in my opinion, as well. And I find it inspiring and reassuring that Professor Pollitt took a critical view towards straightforwardly universal models of public administration and management as solutions ready to roll out of a box in any context, and his favoring of knowledge of context and contextualization in both understanding public administration and in prescribing for public administration. And especially I am impressed how serious he was about investigating how to insert context into theory. It is easy to have context as a kind of an element in the background of research whose connection to the more detailed research theory is not so clear, but thanks to his work, I think it will be easier for scholars like myself to actually work with context in the practical work of applying theory. And I think it's important to keep in mind that with this relevance of context, he by no means suggested that policy transfer from context to another would always be problematic, or that there would always be these contextual exceptionalisms which couldn't be understood from outside. It's simply rather that contextual knowledge and its application is essential for both successful policy and insightful research. And while this could seem a bit like bread and butter for us as public administration experts, research and practitioners, also in Finland, as a small state which is very much involved with many kinds of transfer or policy transfer, it is important to keep in mind, because this straightforward universalism is still very live and abundant in both research and practice around us. The next lesson is Professor Pollitt's view on the multidisciplinarity of public administration and management. I think this is another idea of lasting and growing importance. In his view, as I interpret it, there should be a plurality of approaches to studying public administration, but also a medium of discussion to connect, to generate correspondence between or within this plurality. I think this very much relates to with the importance of context, that all or various plural perspectives are needed for mapping the relevant context. This approach for public administration and management makes much sense to me as a student of policy ideas, in which I cannot fail to see how eclectic their development and application is. And the third lesson is drawn from the already many times referenced Brabant lecture, and also from the Professor Pollitt's recent advanced introduction to public management and administration, which I also recommend very strongly for everyone, and I'm also going to make all my students read it. In the advanced intro, Professor Pollitt discussed big issues in public administration, current and forthcoming, and he argued that there are 4 interconnected issues that are currently not studied in their PA implications as much as they should be, and they were fiscal austerity, technological change, demographic change, and climate change. And in addition, we could read Professor Pollitt's Brabant lecture as presenting a 5th understudied issue, the relative decline of Western and Anglosphere dominance in global public administration, and then the rising influence of non-Western states and powers such as China, India, other Asian and some Latin American states. In this lecture, he argued that Anglosphere dominance in public administration was never genuinely global or absolute, and that the success of Anglosphere originated reform models is increasingly being brought to question. I think this is a very significant notion and should be taken seriously, especially when it comes from a long-time scholar of Western and Anglosphere and OECD governments, and not to forget a scholar of UK government, which in my view could be understood as an influential core within a core of Western governments and public administration. And I think junior scholars and future scholars will most definitely be dealing with these 5 issues and their joint effects, and it will be a crucial question whether Western governments can respond to the threat of environmental crisis, demographic crisis, and steer technological change, which is rapid, and to do this within a continued regime of fiscal austerity and without utilizing a form of state developmentalism as many non-Western states are doing. So that's one window to the interconnectedness of these big issues. And concerning the change in dominance from Western PA to something else, I think this change can potentially be positive in the sense of the world and the world of public administration and management becoming more genuinely global and plural. And following Professor Pollitt's perspective and argument, this does not necessarily mean that there will be non-Western hegemony in its own turn. Western scholars and practitioners, European scholars, can very well reciprocate the non-Western strategy of adapting and selectively applying whatever suits their contexts best. Thank you very much.